Hey everyone, you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and I am your host, Andrew Davis. And before we really get into this interview, I do want to remind everyone that you need to support and financially support what you love, whether it is this show, my guest, anime in general, or anything corporate. You need to support it because without your economic support, it doesn't get made. But enough about that because I have with me amazing voice actor John Gremillion. So welcome to the show. Hopefully I got the name right.
Yeah, you
Hopefully.
did. Yeah, no, you did well. Very good.
Yes, yes. So I'm very excited because I do want to talk about Gentle Criminal, Mihawk, and
Hmm.
Yamato from Devil Survivor 2.
Oh,
But
wow.
before we really get into those three roles, I am curious how you got into voice acting as you are, and I'm going to just call it as I see it, one of the people who was sort of at the beginning when anime was coming to the West, as far as in Texas and all that stuff. You
Yeah,
were
yeah,
impetus.
you're right. About I think it's about 60% of all the American dub for anime happens here in Texas. It happens between Sentai Studios here in Texas and Okratron and Funimation, which is now Crunchyroll. And in the late 90s, ADV Films, which is now known as Sentai, um, founded by John Ledford and Matt Greenfield, they had lots of licenses to do a lot of anime titles, Bubblegum Crisis and Dirty Pair and Golden Boy and all these really cool old series and everything. And they didn't have any actors. They didn't have a pool of actors to do them. They didn't have a talent pool. So they put out audition notices in the local paper. So we look in the back of what's called the Houston Press, which is still active in Houston right now. It's online, and we saw friends of mine would see open call auditions every couple of months for a little while. I don't know how long it lasted, but and we all went down there just and stayed in a big room in a studio, and we all went one by one in to meet Matt Greenfield and try an audition for like the show Dirty Pair and stuff like that. I remember my audition was for Dirty Pair, and um, and a bunch of us got taken into their talent pool until they had a big enough pool of actors. And so if you Houston has a huge theater scene, right? There's lots of theaters here in town, Alley Theater and Catastrophic Theater, Main Street Theater, Stages, all these really Fourth Wall Theater Company, all these really well-known things. And if you go see a lot of Houston theater, chances are you're looking at somebody on stage who has, if you look up their name, they've got an anime rap sheet on IMDb. They've got, because we've all been doing it for about 25 years. And people join at different times, but I was one of the people who got in kind of what you'd call the ground floor with when it all was starting up. I think they had been going for about a year, perhaps 6 months maybe, but I was in there in like 1998, I think, is when I did my first job.
Yeah, it was very much the Wild West. I think people don't realize that it was very, I guess, chaotic is a nice way to put it. And then it was a new concept. I don't think anybody knew what they were really doing or getting themselves into per se. I think that they knew anime was starting to get popular, but I also think that while, even AD Films was figuring things out and even, Funimation was coming on the scene, during 2003, they were still trying to figure out even the direction. And so, what was
Mhm.
this like too? Because even dubbing something, and I think people also don't realize that it's not American animation where it's written, then recorded, and then the animation
Right,
happens.
right.
Anime is the reverse of that. So you got to match the flaps.
Right. You've got to
Well,
match, you've got to rewrite the script to someone has to rewrite the script, Japanese script, into American and into English, and then we have to. And when they do that, they change it so that hopefully the writer who you're working with has watched the number of flaps, and part of their job when they're actually translating each sentence is to translate it in such a way that it matches the number of lip flaps or at least enough to get close enough to when you get an actor in a studio, you're matching it pretty well if you say the English translation. And sometimes I remember doing some sessions when it didn't work that way, and the director had to rewrite and keep kind of trimming it on the fly as we were in the studio. That happened a lot.
and then also back in the day, editing technology wasn't where it was at.
Mm.
Today, there's a lot more editing technology for
All
those who
right.
don't know. And, you can speed up somebody's voice, you could slow it down,
Yeah.
and you could also add some post effects. But at the beginning, I don't think that existed to the same effect.
I'm not. That's a good point, because I don't really remember when that came into play. I don't remember exactly when the engineers were able to squish your voice or expand it or something. It happened pretty soon. I think when they were using, I think Pro Tools was what they were using in the studio, and I don't really remember when it started happening, but it didn't take too long. I was doing some titles where they had to squish and stretch what I was saying to make it fit pretty early on, pretty in the early 2000s, I think. And
yeah, I mean, I'm not a voice engineer. I'm not a voice actor. So
I'm also a video editor. So what you're saying about while I was at ADV, my 9 to 5 job was as a video editor. And in the late 90s, I graduated film school in 95. So I was an intern and then full-time avid editor at a facility, and nobody was doing the home editing on anything like they are now. And it all completely changed within about 10 years. It was this rapid change within about 10 to 12 years. So the internet was exploding like from 95 on, or just getting birthed. And then that was getting up there in 98. And so you had those three things. You had the internet, you had video editing technology, and you had anime getting more popular all at the same time. So it's really been a cool, fascinating journey how that's happened.
and then anime is only getting bigger, and now anime is cool. I mean, I remember being 7 years old and everybody was watching Pokemon, but then people grew out of the anime stuff, and now I'm like 13, and I wasn't getting shoved into a locker per se, but I was definitely looked at weird in school. And now all these kids who are like, "Oh man, did you see the latest episode?" And I'm like, "Yeah, did you see it?" And like they're my age and they're the same people. Like it's like the high school quarterback now watching anime. And so is, the computer science, for lack of a better word, nerd, and they're equals in the conversation. It's so weird.
That's
so
true.
Weird.
That's very true. And a lot of popular, it's becoming more mainstream in terms of, I mean, song lyrics are talking about it. Hip hop artists talking about watching anime, and and what I'm kind of happy about, I got to be honest with you, is that I'm kind of glad in a way that it wasn't such an incredibly popular mainstream thing when I was getting into it, because there would have been a lot more pressure, I've got to, oh boy, this is going to be seen everywhere. I've really got it. This is going to be on somebody's top 10. I've really got to get this role right. I've got to get these lines really right. I would have given myself a little too much pressure, probably. I think a lot of actors would agree that it's a lot more fun and interesting when you can just go in and say, hey, we're just going to do something. You can focus on the art. You can focus on the performance. You can focus on the story. You're not thinking in the back of your mind, oh my gosh, this is My Hero Academia. This is going to be on Toonami this weekend, and I've really got to nail this. So in fact, when I auditioned for Gentle Criminal, I got an audition for it in an email, and I remember I was watching My Hero Academia. Everybody was talking about it. It was such a cool show, and I really wanted to be on it. There he is. Who's that handsome devil? And and I remember I got real serious about it. It felt very different than the typical anime role that I used to audition for or go in for. Usually, there were not a lot of auditions a long time ago. When I was doing ADV for years and years, and even at Funimation, when I first got cast at Funimation, I did not audition to play Mihawk. I did not audition to play many of the roles that I ever played at Funimation at the beginning or at ADV. Almost never. There was almost never an actual audition. The directors heard your voice. They heard your range. They heard a voice reel that you could do. And they, one of a few things will happen. They'll know your range, hopefully, and they'll cast you based on, oh, well, he can do accents. He can do this. He can do that. I know what he's capable of. So then they just kind of cast you. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go record something at Sentai, and I've already been cast, and I have no idea what it is. And usually that's the way it worked at ADV. You'd say, hey, we've got a few hours for you to do a show. Come on in. I didn't know what it was, and I would walk in and say, well, here's your character. Here's the show. You go in cold, and you did not know what was going on. There were no simul-dubs back then either. Everything was on VHS before it was on DVD. Then it was on the Anime Network. That started to kind of explode a little bit and or build up over time.
So let's even talk about Gentle Criminal, since you brought him up. And obviously, A lot of people know who he is. A lot of people love him. You're not supposed to love him, but he's a very lovable
I think
character.
he's a pretty lovable guy.
And he really is a hero, but it raises a lot of questions on a philosophical level of
Yeah.
who should be qualified as a hero. But even the fact that, you know, Deku has to stop him also without alerting and triggering something, so Eri can have her moment, and it really creates a very interesting moment in My Hero.
Mhm.
And I think people who didn't read the manga don't realize that that was in the manga too. So
Yeah.
that's canon. So that's not filler.
Right.
And it's very much a very cool, you know, character to play for 3 or 4 episodes. I think
Yeah.
even if it's even 3 or 4 episodes, and people know who this character is,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Having this character in a very short position, and this character, I don't think is done from My Hero by any imagination.
Hopefully not. I hope you're right. I hope he gets to. I hope we get, not to give spoilers away, but I hope we get to see him again. I hope he and Labrava get to come back and help save the world. I think that's only right. He needs a redemption arc. You know.
And so, what was this like though? Because this is one of the things where everybody knows who Gentle Criminal is, and,
Right.
and it sounds weird when a character only has 4 episodes, but that character.
We had six. We had a total of 6 episodes.
So, but still, 6 episodes is
Sure.
not a lot
No,
compared
it's
to,
not.
I think, 121 episodes. I think is
Right.
so far out.
Right. Yeah, you're right. So
So what is this like though? Because and then he has a Pop Funko too.
yeah,
It's crazy to that degree also. And so what is this like for you? Because that doesn't happen in anime.
no, you're right. You're right. And when I auditioned for it, I had heard all about My Hero and how popular it was. It was a smash hit, and I thought, wow, I really want to be part of this. And I emailed the director to Colleen to who I knew from. She directed me in Black Butler a long time ago, and we were friends, and we'd known each other from back in the day. And we hadn't seen each other in a long time. And I said, hey, listen, just for what it's worth, I'd love to throw my name in the hat if you think there's a voice in the future of the show that I would be good for. I'd love to audition. And she ended up sending me audition slide for Gentle. And I looked at him. The first thing I thought was, okay, this guy's got to be British. Look at him. He's got the T. He's got the mustache. He's got the sidekick going, man, it looks like an Austin Powers film. And look at that. You can't do it. Yeah, he's got to be a Brit. So he's just classy like that. So, and I remember, like I said earlier, because My Hero was so popular and because anime was so much bigger and it was such a bigger deal, it meant more to me to get the role. And I was, and before, that's not happened before. And I, a week later, and I hadn't heard anything, and I was kind of pacing the floor, and I was like waiting for them to post the cast of the High School Musical up on the cork board in school, right? Where did I get the role? Did I get the role? And so when I got it, I was thrilled, and that was a much bigger deal. And I was able to actually watch the whole show and watch the episodes, the subbed episodes, before I would go record the dub, and I could prepare more and think about what I wanted to bring to it more. So it was a very different experience than I'm used to when I usually go into record.
It was totally worth it though, right?
Yeah.
Totally worth it, right?
Oh, it's awesome. He's my favorite character I've ever played. And I'm not just saying that. Mihawk was one of my favorites, or my favorite. And I think Gentle kind of surpasses him for me, because Gentle is a real 3-dimensional character. I talk about this a lot. I've talked about this on other interviews and podcasts and things like that, or at panels. He's got a really deep, interesting backstory. He's got, and the writing of the show reflects this on everybody. I think it's a really well written show. It surprises you all the time. And he's funny. He's tragic. He's got some charm. He's got some real flaws. And I talk about this a lot too, because he's got such a horrible backstory, such a sad one, because when he just tried to do some good and he ended up hurting someone in the process, didn't mean to at all. But then his family didn't back him up. His family kicked him out of the house. So no one supported him when he needed support the most. And then, so he essentially can't deal with who he really is and with his real life and with his past. It's too much for him to bear. It's too much for him to deal with. Then he felt completely forgotten by everyone, even his former classmates. So that was just the final straw. And so he became a different person, not just to become a villain, but to to deal with who he is, and or rather to escape who he really is. He's trying to run away from his life. And he's not trying to face it and make it better. He's trying to just run away from it. And he's using social media to do it. So he's on YouTube.
So interesting. It's so interesting.
That gets really deep, right? Because a lot of people these days who I know, no matter what their age, no matter what their background, they are getting into this idea that if you are not substantial online, then you're not substantial in real life. Do you know what I mean? If I don't have a lot of followers, if I'm not influencing, if people don't think I have an amazing life from Facebook, or if I'm not big on TikTok, then I'm not talented. I don't have, my popularity online is the measure of everything. It's the measure of my self-worth as a person. And I call total BS, right? That's really kind of sad. But it happens to a lot of people, and it's very easy for it to happen to people. And that's the downside of social media. I mean, social media is great for a lot of things, but that's one of the downsides of it. So I think I think that arc has a really deep message, because La Brava had a lot of pain too. She had a lot of pain growing up. She had a really painful backstory, and she was thinking of ending it all. And now she's going along with that whole thing. This is my new persona. This is who I am. They're both trying to tell the world, this is who we really are, when that's not who they are at all.
It's so interesting, and he's such a great character.
Yeah.
And it's so real. That's what I think is a really good way to put, Gentle Criminal, is that even his name says it, where he's a very gentle criminal.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't hide what it is.
It's kind of a way. His name is a way of almost saying, gentle criminal almost is a way of saying, I'm a bad guy, but not really. I try to be a bad guy, but I can't really do it because I'm too good a person inside. So he can't really change who he is. He can't really change the person he is. And that's the lesson that I think he learns. So I'm really hoping he gets to redeem himself somehow and come back and say, I'm going to help out. I'm going to help you guys save the world in my own way that I can. I hope that happens. I'm fingers crossed.
It's such an interesting character, and there's just so much philosophy, because it's even, the idea is who really gets to be a hero, and who gets to be a villain, and why, and what do you even do when a hero fails and causes harm. And there's an entire book called Marvel Civil War, guys, that's all about that. It's about superhero registration, and it's a fascinating concept.
Wow.
This takes it to, I think, a different level, where there is no registration. I think it might hero the same way, but he gets ostracized, and it's so interesting. But I don't want to get to a philosophical debate on this character, because
I don't tell people, don't use social media or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. If you blow up on social media, hey, rock on. That's great. That's fantastic. But your popularity online doesn't have anything to do with your self-worth as a person. Those are two completely different things, right? You're awesome. If you're good at what you do and you like doing something, you don't have to be popular on social media to be good at it. You're still good at it no matter who gives you a thumbs up or down.
There's a wrestler called Timothy Thatcher. Timothy Thatcher doesn't have social media. He is amazing at everything else he does, but he doesn't have social media because he doesn't want it. And he's so good at everything else, he doesn't need it. And I think that's something that people really need to understand about social media, is that social media is a tool.
It is.
Exactly. For me, I schedule all my social media ahead of time, months in advance, and I am not on social media constantly.
Right.
Because I don't want to be bothered from it, because it's a very toxic place.
Right. It can be. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just interesting that he's using social media. It's super, super fascinating character. And I think this is why people love him, because he's real too. And I think everybody can relate to him as an individual.
And that's why I don't, I understand why after the Overhaul arc, and it was really intense, that you suddenly had these characters who look like just these goofy YouTube stars, and people are going, what's going on here? Why is this suddenly taking a shift? But you got to give it time. You got to look deeper into the reasons why they put these different arcs in place. And they're usually deeper than you think.
And then it's super interesting, but I don't want to ruin too much. I mean, I think we kind of ruined the entire arc in one sitting, everybody. But I do want to talk about Black Butler as well.
Oh,
I think this is Arthur.
Yeah, Sir Arthur.
Black Butler is one of those that people know all about.
Yep.
And
Yep.
what's the story behind this one? Because this is another role that you're known for.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And what's really kind of funny is that Colleen directed me in this show too. And so every show that she's directed me in for Funimation, I was British. Kind of strange, right? Because Arthur Randall's from Scotland Yard, and he talks like that, And so, and Gentle was a little more masterpiece theater. He was a bit more classy like that, But yeah, and I'm kind of disappointed that Arthur disappeared. He kind of disappeared after season 2. He was kind of gone all of a sudden, but he was I liked playing him because he was such a Chiel Phantom Hive was such a good foil to him, and he was always kind of playing the straight man and stuffy and frustrated that this guy's always getting the better of me. That's a fun kind of situation to play. And you play it straight. You don't play it for comedy. You just play it for the seriousness of it and how impassioned he was to solve the crimes and do good by Scotland Yard. And he keeps getting one-upped all the time by Chill, right? So that was a fun arc, a fun character arc to play.
And one of the things about Black Butler that I enjoyed is that it was different at the time.
Yeah.
It was definitely darker in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It was also, I felt that it was more neutral than anything else,
Mhm.
where it had elements of more shoujo in there versus shonen.
Mm.
But it also had, some serious things going on, and you could read in between the lines.
Sure.
There's some messed up stuff in that, anime in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And I think that's why a lot of people liked it, because let's be realistic, from 2000 to really 2008, there was a lot of stuff that was similar. And
Yeah.
I think people were craving, like they are right now, for
Mhm.
different materials. And I think Black Butler really was an alternative to what was going on.
Yep.
And I think that's what really helped the show tremendously. Not to mention, obviously,
Sure. And other shows right now. I mean, what's the biggest one? Chainsaw Man right now is another example of that subversive, darker, fascinating story.
yeah, it's just super interesting in that regard. And I
Mhm.
just think people love Black Butler. And then another big role, no pressure for you, was Appleseed. And
Oh yeah, Dr. Kessner. Yeah. Yes.
so this is super interesting because this was the sequel, I think, to the 2004
Mhm.
original, which is a classic
Right.
in so many ways.
This one was Ex Machina.
Yes.
Right.
And then it had motion capture into it. I know a lot of money was pumped into it. I think the budget was like 10 million.
Wow.
And I know that wasn't for just the American version. Obviously, that was the Japanese, the motion capture. But even still, it's a big property. To pump $10 million into an anime film
Mhm.
is a lot of money to pump
Right.
into.
Right.
And so what was this like? Because obviously redoing the voices, maybe modifying a few lines.
It was
maybe,
tougher. It was tougher it's always tougher the toughest thing's live action, of course. But this is right between live action and just kind of the open mouth lip flap anime. Bop, bop, bop. So we took more time on it, and we had a lot of fun with it. I mean, I had a lot of fun getting into this really, really slimy, evil character that he was. I remember when we saw this at Alamo Draft House. We were here when they premiered it. They showed the DVD up at Alamo, and a lot of us went and saw it, and we had a really great time. Yeah, Kessner was a creepy dude. He loves, goes without saying, every evil character, you can't just play evil. You got to have a reason to believe that what you're doing is right, and that you prefer this way of doing things and this way of living, and that's correct, and anybody else. So you don't think you're evil. But he seemed to be one of those people that really kind of enjoyed it. Not only didn't care who he harmed, but almost thought he was so self-righteous in his position about the way the world ought to work and how things ought to go and how things ought to be. And if you don't like it, too bad. I'm going to make it that way anyway. Tough it. But yeah, so.
But and even to go further into that, because obviously, this is a movie, it's not a show. And
Yeah.
there is a little bit of a difference, not
Right.
necessarily in how it was recorded, but how it was premiered. Also, the fact that in a movie, something has to catch your attention a certain way. Typically, in a lot of anime movies, they either go into Phantom Events or Alamo Drafthouse, or a lot of them have special premieres. And so people actually come out and see it. And then there's usually a reaction.
Yeah.
I don't think a show is viewed the same way, where I think
Quite.
anime shows like My Hero, you have 6 episodes. In a movie, you have me sitting in the theater once.
Right.
Versus having me having the ability to grow over 6-7 weeks.
Yeah.
And so what was this like for you? Because obviously going after you recorded and just the reaction to it, because I also think people view anime movies differently.
Yeah.
And also how like the people in Japan reacted to it, or even the producers and all that stuff too matters.
I've got to be really honest with you. Most of the anime that I have recorded, whether it's a series or a movie, I've not really tracked the reactions very much. That's been happening more lately because of things like My Hero, or shows that people are really into these days. And I'm doing more conventions lately, and so I have conversations with more people, so I get more of a sense of how they're reacting to those shows. But I wasn't as hip on it back then. Also, when I recorded this movie a long time ago, I was also not going to any conventions at all or anything like that. I was I'm a stage actor originally, and so I was a stage actor who did voiceover, who did anime, and these days it's kind of the opposite. I'm an anime, and I occasionally do theater. But when we recorded that movie specifically, and they showed it at Alamo, some of the people who were in this theater company that I was in were cast members, and we all went to Alamo together to watch it. And at that time, I was so busy because I was part of a theater company, a resident theater company that was downtown Houston we did about 5 or 6 musicals a year. And so we were always on stage, always in rehearsal, always doing a fundraiser, always doing a gala event. And anime was just something, and I had my 9-to-5 job. So I was doing just stuff all over the place. So you hardly had any free time. And so we not only didn't have free time to watch a lot of the anime that we were in, and I'll be honest, I have not seen most of the anime that I've been in. I've recorded it. I remember recording things, and a lot of things I don't remember recording anymore because it was, within the last 25 years. Because when you do a stage play, I think a lot of voice actors will tell you this too. When you do a stage play, you read the play, you show up, you do a table read, you meet the other performers, you meet the director, you start rehearsing, you break down the scenes, you really get to know the character, you do a lot of trial and error, you have a rehearsal process. You do preview performances, then you perform it for a few weeks in front of an audience, and you really know that piece of work, right? A lot of anime, most of the anime that I've ever recorded, I walk in, I don't know what I'm doing until I get there. I record for a couple of hours, and you're done. 3 hours, 4 hours, and you're done. Maybe you come back next week and record a recurring character, and you do it a little more. But you do the scenes you do only once. You read them only once or twice to get them right. And you move on, and that's what gets permanently on the Blu-ray, the movie release, whatever happened. So a lot of it you only see one time, and there's a lot of it you don't remember. When I recorded Vampire Hunter D, I tell this story, and I don't mind telling it here. Excuse me. There he is. When we re-recorded with Matt Greenfield in 2015, we re-recorded Vampire Hunter D, the original 1985 retro movie, the first one. And I was D. And it took me like an hour and a half. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know the fan base. I didn't know the folklore. I didn't know the sequels. I didn't know anything about it. I just walked in and said, "Oh, it's a cool character. Let's do this. Wow, that's awesome." And it was a great session. It worked well. I liked the result. And then I just completely forgot about it. And a friend of mine called. I did it like in 2 hours on a Tuesday. And a friend of mine called me a few weeks later, and she was like, "Oh man, you did Vampire Hunter D. That's amazing." I was like, "Vampire Hunter what?" And she said, "Vampire Hunter D, John. You guys recorded Vampire Hunter D. I just watched it. It was really great." "What are you talking about?" "John, Vampire Hunter D. You guys were nominated for like an ensemble cast double award. You were nominated for like lead male in a thing. I'm like, what do you? I don't know what you're talking. She goes, John, you were D, and I went, and I had to look it up, and then when I saw it, I immediately recognized it. I said, oh, yeah, of course, okay, I remember that. And she was just like,
so what is that like? Because I mean, I know who Vampire Hunter D is, and
yeah,
a lot of people do too.
yeah.
But like, even what was that like? Because that's almost like, oh snap! I was just in this really big role, and I didn't even know it,
But I
and
didn't
all
know
these
it.
people are
Didn't even
now
know it.
really excited, and
That's right.
it's the
That's
type of thing
exactly right.
that will make you invited to a
Well,
con.
if you really think about it, first of all, a lot of other anime voice actors will have similar stories for you. Oh, I didn't know that was a big show. I didn't follow that. I didn't read that manga. I just recorded this on it. That's my job. I'm a voice actor. And they don't mean to be like going, oh, this doesn't matter, or I don't care about this. No, we care very much about the work when we go in and record it. It's exciting. It's interesting. We like the, and if we get into it and we start watching it, I've watched some of the anime series that I've done, and they're great. I was like, oh, that was really cool. It's because it's a job as a voice actor to just go in there and you don't, like I said, you don't know it until you go in. So you've got a very short attention span for it, or memory of it. And it's also like when famous movies were made in the 70s, 80s, 90s, today, and or little independent films, and people didn't know how big they were going to get, and something about them really caught on and they became really, really popular and really famous. You can never predict that, right?
I mean, I was just speaking last week to John Swayze
Yeah.
about
Oh,
Dazed
yeah.
and Confused, and the beer guy scene.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it sounds like it's a stupid scene, but it sets the whole trajectory of the movie,
That's
and
right.
people know that scene.
That's right. But
And
he didn't know that. But he didn't know that when he was on set. He walked on and was like, "Oh, I'm going to do a beer scene. Okay, who's this guy? Linklater. Okay, Dre. Okay, whatever." However he thought about it, I'm sure he had his own story for you that was really interesting.
Oh, it was fantastic. Totally live. It was a great way to start it. And I started saying I would be stupid enough not to ask and start the interview this way. It was a great interview in so many.
John's a great guy.
It's available now, by the way, everybody. On YouTube and everywhere else where you can get your interviews. I'm totally not plugging my own work here, but continue.
Oh, go right ahead. But yeah, that's what happens. But there's a number of roles I've played that I don't really remember very well, and I'm going to tell you one of them is Devil Survivor too. Is that I don't remember that one well either. That happened. I'm not sure how long we recorded that one, but it was years and years ago. It was over 15 years ago, and that's one that kind of escapes me.
This is the character we're talking about.
That's right.
This might also be the character. I really like this one, but this might be fan art. I'm not too sure, but
fan art. Yeah.
It's a pretty, whoever's piece that is. Please let me know if this is your piece because I want to give cred. But
right.
What is that like even for you though to even go looking back at this? Because obviously Vampire Hunter D and even Devil Survivor, obviously now you know how big this stuff is,
right?
And I'm pretty sure you're a little bit more educated on it looking backwards versus in the moment. But
you try to be. I mean, I try to get my anime education anytime and anywhere that I can, and you kind of build it as you can. You build it as you go. When you've got a job, when you've got a 9 to 5, and then you're doing anime recording at night or in the afternoon or on a lunch break, and then you're doing theater at night and doing other things, and your time is limited. Later on, I can look back and go, well, let me look into this, and let me. The first convention I ever went to, I knew people were going to ask me about stuff, so I studied up on it again. I broke out the Wikipedia, I broke out different websites and different fan sites, and I started getting into the deeper philosophies of some of these characters and remembering. And it jogged my memory about, oh yeah, that's right. I remember the episodes we did that were about, where I had this great big speech about my moral code, and like Basilisk for Funimation was a big one, and Mihawk's a big one too. Mihawk is
we're going to talk about Mihawk. I want to deal with Mihawk because we're going to talk about him. I promise. I promise.
I got you. But he's somebody with a major moral code, even though he's kind of like a supernaturally badass person, and he's a very interesting guy because I record him every couple of years.
We're going to table Mihawk for one second.
Okay, I want
to bring up at least 2 more roles before.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
3 roles, and we can nod about the next one. You could just nod about the next one.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Now, let me tell you a story about him. I remember going and doing that recording session. and I said, this is a great show, this wacky show, Panty and Stocking. This is fantastic. I love it. It was so noisy and so frantic. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a crazy show. So he said, I've just got this great role for you. Come on, do this. So, he's on screen and off in no time flat, right? I probably have never played a character for a shorter period of time, a character that's got a shorter amount of screen time than Coctimus Prime. So, but I went to a convention and I was on a late night panel and we were introducing ourselves, talking about roles that we've played. And I mentioned Mihawk. Yeah, Mihawk. Oh, okay, I'm playing this. I'm playing that. Oh, I've also been panning Stock Coctimus Prime. They just all went nuts. So happy. And so now I've got Coctimus on my demo reel. I included him in I said, I got to go put him on my demo reel because I had no idea how popular that was going to be just because of the show and just because he's such a wacky. There are no small characters.
It's brilliant. It's also obviously a reference to Transformers. There's a lot of things why that role. It's hilarious what they've done with it, and it's a brilliant show. And I didn't think I was going to like it, and it actually took me I was 10 years late to the party with Panty and Stockings because I was just bored. And then I watched. I'm like, man, this is a brilliant show. And how did I miss it on my radar? Yeah, and it's just one of those things where I just was like, this kind of seems stupid. And then when I got into it, and I'm the first person to say I was completely informed, or my thought process was way off base, which happened. But I'm glad I gave it a shot. I really am. Yeah. But yeah, I figured we would just nod about that role. I figured we would just nod.
Salute to him. Yeah, you bet.
And then also another one of my favorite roles is it wrong to pick up?
All right, Don Machi. Yes. Is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon?
Yeah. And then this is, I think, the same time.
Yes, sir. Yeah. That's the other great thing about playing roles is that you never have to look like the role. If you're an actor getting cast in a movie, you got to be jacked. You got to look like that. You got to come correct. All I got to do is provide the voice. Trust me, I don't look that big. So, I'm not going to kick butt like this guy, but as long as I sound like him, yeah, he's way low rough, that kind of voice.
That was the movie, right? I think. Or was he also in the movie? But was he in like 2 seasons? Because I think he came in season.
He did a couple of seasons, yeah.
Yeah. I get confused sometimes, unless characters were in the movie and not. Because I haven't seen the movie. I've seen the 3 seasons. I haven't seen the 4th one yet.
Right.
But yeah, that's that. And then another great role is this one right here.
Oh yeah, you got to have him. Right. Now that's great because I get to go back to my French heritage and I get to speak in the French accent. So I loved Chappelle. I wish Chappelle would have hung around for more seasons of Food Wars because he was a great character. That I wish they would have made him just an angry guy for a couple of seasons and made everybody real scared of him. And then maybe finally in season 3 he has his big moment or something like that. No, they got to him quick. They gave him his moment really fast in season 1. Food Wars is a fantastic show. Everybody really enjoys that show. And I liked that a lot because I like being able to go in and record accents because I don't like it gets old after a while when directors, and I understand exactly why this happens, but directors have it in mind sometimes. They know when they're casting something, they know how people sound, they know what you can do, and they know what your range is, like I said, so that they precast you. And a lot of times I go into the studio and I'm like, well, what does this guy sound like? Oh, it's just like you. And I get dope because I want to do something different every time. I want to sound different. If you look hard enough, you could probably find several roles that sound like the same guy that I've done, either in a nasal, high-pitched voice or a gruff, low voice and stuff like that. There's only a few that are completely unique. And so one of them is Chappelle, because he's French, of course. And the British characters I've played are all pretty unique. They're not exactly sounding like each other. I played some Cockney guys too. So you get to be different, but I like being different all the time. I don't want people to recognize necessarily who I am all the time. It makes it more fun.
Yeah, no, and I think Food Wars, that was directed by Kyle Jones, right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
I know Kyle. I don't know Kyle personally, but from what I hear and the rumors, and I hate to sound, I don't think it's a bad rumor, is that he
No,
has a dark sense of humor in a lot of ways.
he's got a
And
great sense of humor. Kyle's a very, very funny guy. He's a
he apparently, I heard that there's this weird dub where they did a dub movie with him, and then they did their own version,
oh,
and that other version I may or may not have seen it, and
there's a lot of stuff that's been like that. Ghost Stories isn't the only thing that's been rewritten. There's a lot of stuff that got rewritten. There was stuff I did with Stephen Foster that got rewritten on the fly. That's the craziest stuff in the world.
no. This wasn't rewritten.
Oh
They
yeah.
they did a whole nother
Oh yeah. I think you're talking about
on their own dime that wasn't released to the public.
right. But they show it. They show it.
Movie.
Yeah, they show it at conventions.
And it's brilliant. And
Texas Gamera, I think is what you're talking.
Yes. I think it's Kyle's baby, and it's like the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's how the rumors started apparently, and John told that rumor. So if Kyle wants to go after somebody,
no, Kyle's a good guy.
No, I don't think he's gonna mind because it's not a bad rumor. But I digress right there.
No.
But I now really want to dive into Mihawk.
Okay.
Because I love Mihawk. I think Mihawk is a great character. I think the introduction to Mihawk is brilliant. And I think he comes in during Don Krieg, and he just comes in on his little boat. His little boat with like the freaking like neon green flame, just sitting on his little throne. He's just quietly showing up. He kicks Zoro's ass with a little tiny knife. I have the knife right here, everybody.
There you go. There you
go. And then, you know, obviously there's those scenes with Shanks. There's those scenes at, you know, I guess Marineford / G5. And then there's some other stuff that he was just in. And so what is this like? Because he has a bunch of stuff where he has a bunch of small moments. He has a bunch of pivotal moments. He also has, you know, training moments with Zoro or Zolo. And so there's all this stuff with Mihawk that's out there. And then there's a lot of history too.
Yeah.
With Mihawk and Gold Roger. I mean, there's just so much stuff out there.
It's overwhelming. And it's interesting about Mihawk because like I said, I didn't audition to play Mihawk. I think it was Mike McFarland who first directed me in the first episodes that I ever recorded. And they were back in 2005 or 6. And I remember walking in and I didn't know how to do his voice at first. And I because he looks like kind of a Nico Montoya, but I didn't want to make him a Spaniard. And I think somebody made him French in a different dub, and that didn't work. And so I had just seen a Harry Potter movie, and I really liked Alan Rickman as Snape, you know, and I thought, how could I put that in there? So I can't do Alan Rickman necessarily, but you know, he's got that very sly kind of sound to his voice, very snide. And if you just take away the British and you keep the nasal, and he sounds a bit haughty, and that's Mihawk. So that's how I kind of developed that. I just said, let's try that. They said, okay, that's good. So he sounds kind of snooty and very confident and above it all, like he's insulting people. You know, that's kind of nasally, kind of sly voice. So that's what I like about that choice for him. And sometimes that comes out in some episodes more than others, because what's interesting is, again, I recorded him for the first time in like 2005. So I don't record him very often. He shows up just every now and then, says, hello, I'm a badass, goodbye. And he takes off. And then 18 months later, they call me back. Hey, you want to come do this? Who? Mihawk. We were joking around. Well, it wasn't even a joke, but I was on an online panel of One Piece actors on YouTube one time. And we were asked the question, what is your little personal tick to get into your role? What do you do in the studio to get into character? And they all had an answer that was really interesting. You know, this person just goes la, la, la in the voice and then just decides to do every line to get into it. Another person goes in the corner and screams really loud and gets into the thing and just gets their voice. And they asked me what I did. And I was like, I don't have one. I walk in the studio and I go, hi, what does this guy sound like again? I recorded him 2 years ago. Play back the last thing I did. So
This is like the most anti One Piece answer ever. Like,
That's right. That's right. No, but Mihawk is so he's so cool to me because he is like I said again, he's got a very strong moral code. He's got a very solid foundation of philosophy about how things need to be, how he needs to be, how other people, how life needs to go, and he's completely staunch about it, 100% confident about it. And as we're finding out more and more about him in the manga, um, I don't think he was ever a warlord. Actually, we think he's a warlord, but then he wasn't really. He was just he was asked to be in that position, and there's more than meets the eye.
It's interesting because while he was technically, I guess, in that position, and it's confusing a little bit, and I don't want to dive too much into it for spoiler reasons.
Right.
But he's training, Zolo during that time. He meets with Shanks, and they're talking about Luffy, oddly enough, which means that Mihawk respects Shanks. To some degree, I think Mihawk respects Luffy at the same time. You also look at the Marineford battle, and he has a fight with Vista from the Whitebeard Pirates. And he says, if I'm the world's greatest swordsman, how would I not know who you are? And he asks Vista to show what Vista has against Mihawk. And so I think there's this whole thing where it's very interesting where he sounds snooty, he sounds arrogant, he sounds confident, he sounds, kind of like a douchebag to some degree, a little douchey, but he also has a lot of respect for a lot of different people.
Yeah, he does.
And I think he respects Whitebeard to a degree. I don't know if he respects, the Marines per se. And so, it's very interesting because we get those awesome scenes though. I mean, the fact that, Marineford and that entire battle with the Mihawk stuff and Mihawk doing what Mihawk does best. I mean, there's some cool moments in there. And so it's super interesting to have a character that is beyond, because it's not Doflamingo. Mihawk is not Doflamingo. And Ron McCollum's been on, and I love Doflamingo, but they're very different personalities.
Yes. And so one of my favorite things that we got to record was that we got to re-record the whole Zoro battle on the East Blue that got put out on Blu-ray with different animation, with updated animation. And I got to take the knife out again and do that whole thing again. Because we redid that whole scene. That's the old one. And the newer one on the Adventures of East Blue, which is a separate Blu-ray adventure that we redubbed a few years ago. That's on my reel, and Mihawk's got a couple of lines in there that he never had before, and he asks Zoro, what is your burden? To what do you wish to gain? For what do you wish to gain power, weak one? And Zoro comes at him with all he's got, and he's just sitting there with a knife, and he just goes, "You're certainly ferocious. I'll give you that." Just back and forth like this. He's just very calm, and that wasn't in the original, episode when they had the fight. So they redid the whole fight, and I'm. A lot of people have asked me if they're gonna. Of course, I don't know if they're gonna meet up again. I mean, I would think you have to have at some point in the future a rematch between the two. And some people are telling me, no, I don't know. It's probably going to be Mihawk versus either Shanks or Mihawk versus somebody else. I'm like, well, no, I think they're going to have to. I think they're going to have a rematch. And my guess would be that what I would like to see, perhaps, is that they have to call it a draw because perhaps Zoro, after all of his character development and getting trained by Mihawk and Mihawk having respect for him, Mihawk's going to be in a position where Zoro can get the better of him for just a second, but he doesn't kill him. He just scars him in the same way, and then they're both, now I matched you.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I have a theory how One Piece ends.
Yeah, you and a lot of other people.
My theory is so I think there's going to be a final battle, and then I think they're going to sail off, and then I think 5 years, 10 years later, you're going to have Luffy getting executed in Rouge Town.
Really,
much like Gold Roger was to usher in the next generation of piracy. And then that sets, the whole thing back full circle. And Luffy says, "You can find all my treasure in one piece."
Oh my
And that
God.
sets the whole thing back in motion like 20 years later.
Wow.
Because if you think about it,
Yeah.
going back to Impel Down, Luffy made a deal that his life would be shortened, and so now he's sick, much like old Roger was.
Okay.
Because it's that, or the only other way it could end is that they find something and then or they don't find One Piece and they just continue to set forward and
Well,
sail.
I think it's been stated. I think it's been stated really clearly that there is a One Piece and it's really beautiful. And we were joking at a panel. Mike McFarland and Kyle Phillips and I were on a One Piece panel at Connecticon in Connecticut, and I was so out of place because they direct and write that show, and I don't know any of what they know. And I'm like, hi, I'm here. I'm here too. And I didn't know how to answer a lot of these deeper questions, but they got asked by somebody, well, how do you think the show's going to end? And Mike McFarland said, I think they're going to open up this treasure chest. There's going to be a red button, and they're going to hit the red button, and the whole series starts all over again. It's like, no. So that was.
I have a very, very, very deeply philosophical theory on this. And the only reason why is that I think it would be really smart.
Yeah.
Or his Luffy's crew saves him one by one. They take out, the Marines, and then they free Luffy, sort of smack him on the head, say you're a big idiot, and then they all go sailing off and continue their adventure as pirates. Because I think that it has to have a satisfying ending. I think the worst thing for One Piece is not to have a satisfying ending. I think it would do so much damage, and it would upset so many people. And I don't think Oda, the guy who's doing the manga and drawing the manga and is creating all this, wants to leave fans being like, yeah, the ending was shitty. I don't think we want a Seinfeld ending, is my point. But that's not Mihawk's problem.
Okay.
Mihawk could be part of the ending.
Right.
But even to bring this back to Mihawk, because obviously, Mihawk's been in movies, several episodes. You're always called back in. Obviously, people, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think when you're on One Piece and you're in a very prominent role, I think people also say, okay, this voice actor's now been in One Piece and has a prominent role. Like whether you're Doflamingo, whether you're one of the admirals, whether you're one of the Straw Hat, pirate crews, whether your Smoker is another prominent role, or Law. And I think people sometimes respect voice actors a little bit more when they get to that where, okay, you have a notable character who is a badass who has pivotal positions. And I think that's whether that's a respectable position or not. I don't know if that's up for debate at the moment, but I think that people say, okay, you're Mihawk. Now I know who you are. Now I'm interested in what else you've done. It was like a qualifier, if that makes sense. And whether you disagree with me is fine, everybody, but that's just how I explain it the best way I can.
It's definitely true that I've been doing this for about 25 years, and I think Mihawk and Gentle are the two characters that people really genuinely automatically recognize. There's others, sure, that they hear, oh, you've been in this show and you played this role. I didn't know that, and that's always fun to find out. But yeah, it goes without saying. I think you're right that when you have a prominent role in a show that people really dig, it only goes without. It's only natural that people then look into more of what you've done and want to talk to you more about voice acting and are interested more in your career, because that kind of goes with the territory. Yeah.
Yeah, people only want to talk to me when I start talking about money and I make really good stock trades, and it was like, yeah, great. I would love to talk to you. 5 years ago, no, thank you.
That would have
It's very funny whenever I feel people get success, people want to talk to other people then, and good, bad, or whatnot. And look, I'm a huge One Piece fan. I've been watching One Piece forever, but I also knew you were in Food Wars. I knew you were Optimus Prime, for lack of a better word. I thought it was really, really ridiculous, and I'm like, man. That's, but obviously, I've done research on other things, but you've been in a bunch of other things as well. Galaxy Railway is a good example.
Oh yeah, it was the first show I did for Funimation was Galaxy Railways, and I auditioned over the phone. Mike McFarlane. No, I did. Mike McFarlane. I met Mike McFarlane because I went to a convention just to visit some friends of mine. I heard there was a convention in town in 2007, and I went to Onicon. I think the first Onicon they had downtown near the airport. And I said, And I ran into Greg Ayers and Monica Rial and these other friends of mine, Lucy Christian, and I said, hey, guys, you know, I was just interested in the whole scene and what was going on, and they told me more about Funimation, and I said, okay, I want to look into this. And so someone introduced me to Mike, and I talked to Mike on the phone. I had not met him in person yet, and he told me what it would entail. Because, hey, do you want to drive from Houston to Fort Worth and back? Because you got to drive yourself and get a hotel or do whatever you're going to do, or you drive up in the morning, record for a couple hours, drive all the way home. So you're in the car for 8 hours. Are you willing to do that? I said, sure, I'll do it. I want to be in these other shows. It sounds really fun. And so I'm a video editor, and so I edited together a bunch of my best stuff that I thought was good from ADV to show him some range. And I sent that to him, and then he called me and said, okay, I want to audition you for the show called Galaxy Railways. But he just sent me some lines, and I just read them over the phone. And he said, okay, great. Why don't you come on in and we'll play this role. And so I played the role of the captain on that show. And that was my first one. And then after that, we did, what was this? Trinity Blood and Basilisk and One Piece. And then things just went from there. And some Full Metal Alchemist stuff and Full Metal Brotherhood. And we did there was a Full Metal Alchemist movie called The Conqueror of Shambhala, and I played
That's a good one. I enjoyed that
movie. Beginning of that. Yeah, I was a Huskinson at the beginning of that. Huskisson. And so then it just took off from there. We did Black Butler and
and then even coming back to One Piece too, because One Piece, you know, I had Daniel Baha on, obviously John Swayze's been on, Rena Valencia's been on, everybody's been on.
Yeah.
If you work for Funimation, it's like a requirement that you're in One Piece.
They've got enough characters. They've got enough arcs. Yeah.
It's kind of funny. And they even bring people in outside of, you know, Crunchyroll Funimation. There are people in LA who have voiced characters in One Piece because they have legitimately run out of voice actors.
Wow.
I mean, if you think about it, though, One Piece is that show.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of different characters, and it's so important. But anyway, I digress right there. But you know, One Piece is the gift that keeps on giving, because there's video games. There's a game coming out, you know, in January, and I don't know if Mihawk's in that game because it's definitely more of an Alabasta game. But it's the first game that almost is canon to some degree.
I've played Mihawk in one video game. I think it was called One Piece something adventure, and Endless Adventure, or gosh, I don't want to get the name wrong. Unlimited Adventure, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right, I think. But
video games are so different though to record, because there's no real scene work. You're just doing these isolated lines and reactions and stuff. It's really weird. It's very
like when your health is half low, you're more like panting.
Yeah. You're detached.
But from my understanding, the video game work is way more taxing.
It is. Yeah, that's for sure.
But what were we saying?
Yeah, because you know, you're mostly recording just reactions to certain lines, to certain situations. So you're completely detached from the moment of the content. Everything's out of context. You know, your lines are just like, oh, and again, and you know, you just do them in a row. And there can be a lot of screaming. So luckily I haven't done video games that involved me screaming too much. I feel sorry for a lot of other voice actors. Like anybody who's done anything Dragon Ball, I feel sorry. I've never done a Dragon Ball episode, and I don't know if I'd ever want to, because I'd have to scream my head off. It takes a real toll on your voice. And the other video game that I did that was a big one was when Gentle and LaBrava were in the My Hero Heroes Justice 2, which was great. Really, really fun. And I love watching people play that stuff, because, you know, when you hear it in context, it's great. It's really fun. It's really cool to see the battles happen.
Yeah, no, I completely.
Yeah, video games are very, very different.
There's a reason why I don't want to be a voice actor. There are two. If I really wanted it, I think I can do it. And if I really put in the effort and I sought after and I wanted to move to Texas, I'm on the East Coast. I like being on the East Coast.
Right.
No offense to anybody in Texas, but my family's on the East Coast. But if I really wanted, I think that if I put in the work, I could do it. I think anybody can in a lot of ways. If you really want some, you can get it. But anime is an escape for me in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
Yeah.
And B, you know what is just doing this show 4 nights a week is taxing on my voice, let alone, screaming and doing video game work. I really do not want to damage my vocal cords. And that's the other thing too is
I've done my share. I've done my share of damage to my vocal cords like everybody else. Yeah.
so I would prefer not to. I damage plenty of other things on my body. I would like my voice to stay intact for as
Good
long
for
as
you.
possible. Nothing against anybody else. If
No,
you so choose to damage your vocal cords, I'm not going to stop anybody from doing that task. That's all on you. But I think that's something that people have to really figure out. And then the other thing too is that it's a tough road. It's a tough road economically. It really is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Rob McCollum was explaining a lot of stuff on this show a while back. And, making a living as a voice actor on straight voice acting is very
just on voice acting is very tough. Yes.
In dubbing, if you're doing work for the NBA or you're doing, corporate voice acting, that's a little bit different.
Corporate's good. Corporate pays well and pays better because it's for usually oil and gas companies, and you're doing a lot of intranet training and stuff like that. I've done a lot of that, and that's a higher rate than anime. But you may if you go to a lot of conventions, that can be good for you. I mean that's part of the whole package. That's part of the whole scene to go to cons. And I like going to cons because I really like meeting fans, and I really like meeting other people and who like what you do. Because when you record anime, you're in a studio by yourself, and you hope you're doing a good job, and you trust with the director, and you trust how you feel about it. It's going to be the right thing. But you're not on a live stage getting feedback from an audience. You're not when you're at a convention. You can talk to people about what the roles mean to them, what anime means to them. You can do panels where you answer questions and you have an audience and you get direct feedback, and you can see how they feel about seeing you and admiring your work and whatever it is. So there's having that camaraderie and having that that energy back and forth between people in person does a lot for you.
Yeah, and I think it is. It's a brand thing, and I think that obviously, look, I used to do cons as a fan panelist, and the only reason why I used to do it is I like lecturing, I like talking about stuff, and I like giving people knowledge.
There you go.
I like interacting with people, and it's a really cool feeling when you sell out a room. And I've done it twice.
Yeah.
I sold out a room in the Javits Center.
That's great.
It's at 250 people. People were rejected, and I had a panel before that, and then I had my second panel, which sold out, was right after my first one. I said to everyone, I said, you do not want to leave this room, because there was a line outside 30 minutes into my first panel where I had about 70 people, and I said to the 70 people, I said, you're not getting back in. And I was 100% right, and I had a room for 45 minutes where I could have dropped a pin and it would have been hurt in the back. Very, very weird circumstance.
Yeah, that's great. That's
very, very weird circumstance. And I was super, super cool experience and it was the second time I've ever sold out a room. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like
that's awesome.
I'm a nobody. I'm not getting paid. I'm not a guest. And awesome. It's very cool in that regard. But I was going to talk about one more role.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I ask you another question after that. And I have to ask this because I know David Wall, who is a co-creator on Witchblade.
Oh, okay.
And I know that you were in Witchblade as this guy.
Oh my gosh.
And so David Wall is obviously comics. He's right now working for one of my favorite companies called Zenoscope.
Yep.
And I may or may not be using this to pitch to him to get him on my show. Full disclosure. But I'm sure he'll appreciate it. I know Michael Turner was involved in that. I know Mark Silvestri was in that. And all these people are like top people in comics. So what was this role like? Because there's going to be some fan who's going to be like, this is the question I've been waiting for. There's going to be somebody. There might only be one, but we're going to make that person's day right now.
You're the first. You're the first guy who's asked about that role and about that show. And I can't remember when we recorded it. It wasn't too long ago, but it was fun. I mean, it's always fun to play a different kind of almost nebbish character who's not like you. You know, that's what I enjoy. I like doing characters that aren't exactly like me and that don't have my exact voice. And I'd love to go back and listen to that show because I never watched it. I recorded it, but I never saw it. And I'd love to go back and see it. But it was very interesting.
I just know it's one of the first bridges between that show and I feel like a major comic that was extremely popular in the 90s into the anime world. And then things like Blade Runner and some other stuff has crossed over. But this really is, I think, the first show that's done it. And that's why I bring it up because it is really a significant show.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for what the show did, but for opening up the gate a little bit.
And I wasn't as aware when I recorded it how big Witchblade was either.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It kept Top Cow, you know, that image alive for a good chunk, and it's still popular, and people are really loving it. It's quote unquote bad girl art. So it's a very interesting comic. It's a very important comic, and it made a lot of waves. But enough about that because I have one more question for you, and then I'm gonna give you a chance to self-promote. And I am curious because obviously we spoke a little bit about the industry at the start of this interview, but I feel like in the last 10 years, let alone in the last 3, the entire scene, both in the anime cons and the anime world, has changed dramatically.
Yes,
for a lot of reasons. COVID, obviously, people have, technology's gotten a lot better. There's also a lot more projects, I feel. Also, the anime floodgates are wide open. And let's be realistic, there's been almost $1.5 billion, pumped into the anime world. Between it, I don't think you and me are going to get in trouble, but it's crystal clear that Crunchyroll was sold to Sony, or they bought from AT&T. I don't think for like almost 1.2 billion. I don't think that's a secret. And if it is, I hate to disclose it.
I have no idea.
It's pretty public, everybody, because they're both public companies. But what do you feel has changed, and even just where it's gone? Because it's
like I said before, it's really kind of I try not to think about it too much, and I try not to let it affect how I audition and how I record. But there's no mistaking these days how much more important it is to land a certain role. And a long time ago, it used to be, well, okay, I'll audition for this anime, and I'll have this much recording time, and I'll it'll take up put it on my calendar. But now there's there's a huge shift in terms of with its popularity come both good and bad things. I think it's great that it's gone so much more mainstream. I think it's fantastic that people enjoy it. I think it's great that there's such a huge variety of different types of shows and work that can get put out there, and work for voice actors, and that it can. I hope it stays popular. I think it's wonderful. I love going to cons, and I love that there's more conventions. I love that there's more opportunities for people to come together and celebrate it. So I think that's all really good stuff. The only thing that's again a negative is when I audition for something or perform a role, I just like to focus on the work. And I don't want to think about this show is this popular and you've got to do a really awesome job, because that just gets in the way of your process as an actor. You don't want to think about, God, I better nail this. Or, I hope that people on Twitter don't talk about, oh, I like this voice, I don't like this voice. You don't want to think about it like that. You just want to enjoy the work. So it's
up to my world.
That's become a little bit more of a challenge, when you're recording.
I could see that, and I completely understand it. I mean, for me, I'm dealing with celebrities, and I'm dealing with people who have egos, and I'm like, oh man, I better not fuck this thing up. Because that's how it is to me. And so I completely get it. I wish that I could not think like that, but it is what it is, because and it's got
to get perspective on it. You just got to go, look, I mean, nobody ever knew that Star Wars would be the huge hit that it was. Nobody thought it was going to get made. It had all kinds of problems. All these really famous movies just started from nothing, and they thought they weren't going to get them finished, and then they became incredibly popular and they became landmark films. But you don't plan to be a landmark. You don't plan to be incredibly popular. It happens because it happens. It happens for one reason or another, that people just gravitate towards something for some reason or another. And I think it's really interesting, the trends that are happening these days. It's exciting. I mean, it's an exciting time, no doubt. And I'm glad to have been a part of it for as long as I have. And I hope to keep cranking, keep doing my thing. You know, I wish I still had the voice I had 25 years ago, because I had a higher pitched voice. I could do more with it than I can now. So my range is kind of a little bit less, not in terms of accents, but in terms of certain pitch or certain things that I can scream at certain pitches. It's not the same anymore. That's for sure.
I'm 29, so I'm pretty sure my voice is going to change too when I get closer to your age. But I'm hoping that you know, my voice doesn't really come dark like this, because that would not be good. But I digress right there. I do want to give you a chance to self-promote yourself, because I know you have a website. I know you have cons that you're going to. I know that. I don't know if you have merch at the moment, but if you don't,
I do have. Well, actually, you know, I'm at my dining room table. I'll pull this out of a box. Hold on one second. This is on the box of my table. This is a Mihawk print that I sell at conventions and on my website.
I'm sorry, who's Mihawk again?
Oh yeah, who's Mihawk? Yeah, he's this guy. So the guy, I have a website. It's just johngremillion.com. And when I meet people at conventions, there's an artist. Her name is Sarah Madura. She was at NYC. She was at Anime New York at NYC Con this weekend. She's an amazing artist. And I commissioned her to make prints of the different characters that I play. There's a couple of Mihawks. General Lever from Akame Got Killed. There's Chappelle from Food Wars and Black Butler, and Vampire Hunter D. So she made prints of all those. That's original artwork that I sell with an autograph on my website. If you want to go to the website, you can just go to the store page on johngremillion.com and check those out. And I'll sign those and mail them off to people. And if I don't see people at conventions, there's always that option. And I'm on at jgrem on Twitter. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be on Twitter, but who knows? But no Hive yet. I will hear Hive's exploding, but I haven't dug into that yet. Let's see. Instagram, it's just at John Gremillion, just my full name in lowercase. And yeah, that's it. This weekend, we're going to be at Anime Dallas. John Swayze is running John Swayze runs some great conventions, Anime Houston and Anime Dallas. And I've been to both of them, and I'm always love being a guest there because they treat you great. And it's, we're going to be at Anime Dallas this weekend, Black Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday at the Hyatt Regency Dallas. And then let's see, I'll be in Pasadena, Texas at Fanime Expo. I'm going to be at Triad Con next year, and there's been Black Hills Con in June. There's some different stuff coming up in 2023 that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and I've been saying this for a while, and I'm going to keep saying it, and saying it since 2020. You have to support, people that you like. You have to support indie. You have to support voice actors, and you have to buy their merch. You have to actually watch the shows they're in. You have to watch anime legally. Crunchyroll is $80 a year, guys. It's not that hard.
Right.
To watch anime legally. What is it? HD Live, I want to say, or Dive is, I think.
High Dive, yeah.
High Dive.
High Dive is Sentai's website.
Does Sentai have something, or is that Sentai's?
That's Sentai, High Dive.
Yeah. I'm making sure it's been a while.
Yeah, Sentai's got highdive.com, and then there's Crunchyroll, yeah.
And so obviously, it's not that hard to watch this stuff. Or you can watch it on Netflix, however you want to watch it. Yeah. I personally do not care, but you should be watching it legally, because when you watch it legally, obviously it gets supported and more of it winds up getting made.
Yeah, good for you. Good on you.
And so you should be doing that. And then obviously, if you like voice actors, you should go to cons that they're at. You should buy their merch at conventions. Usually you get to talk to them. If they're signing something, you should pay for it. That's another thing. It makes a difference, because It just doesn't. It's very important.
Yeah.
Furthermore, let's say that you're not going to a con and you don't want to, purchase something at the current time. You should be following them on social media, whether that's a Facebook page, getting on their email list, whatever, Twitter, Instagram, Hive, whatever else there is, TikTok, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely be following them there too, because it's free and it doesn't cost anything. And you should be liking what they put out, because that does help as well.
There you go.
It makes a huge difference. You'd be surprised that if somebody has 1 million followers on Instagram and they all like a photo of that person, guess what? It's going to affect the algorithm tremendously. And that person's probably going to get sales directly or indirectly, or they might even get a role out of it.
Who knows? Yeah, that's a thought.
But enough about that, because I'm going to quickly promote myself. Obviously, all my social media is down there below.
Yeah.
I am probably going to stay on Twitter because I'm lazy.
Hey, do what you got to do, man.
I'm smart enough not to bet against Elon, is all I'm going to say. Yeah, I may or may not want a Tesla, so I might be in contract negotiations. No, I'm not. I view the entire circumstance as, why leave one for the other? Why not have both? To me, that's the answer to every problem.
Awesome.
Is it more the merrier? But I'm all over social media at Pop Anime Comics, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. You name it, it's Pop Anime Comics. And some of this stuff I don't post as much as I should, but obviously that's that. I also have Buy Me a Coffee if you like to support this show. If not, that's perfectly fine, everybody. Or if you would like to buy ad space on this show, that's typically how I go through this. Also, if you would like to be a guest on my show and you're a voice actor, comic writer, wrestler, or author, or cosplayer, you can hit me up pretty much on all my social medias as well. So that's pretty much everything I got as far as I'm concerned. And I believe that is a wrap. So peace.